All right, welcome to the Network Plumbing Working Group meeting for June 3rd, 2021. This is Doug Smith. I'm standing in for Dan Williams. We've got a pretty packed agenda today. Try to rip through what we can quickly, and then we've got a presentation on the external network operator. Proceeding to regular business, we have one candidate maintainer and one project candidate today. Additionally, if anyone else has any candidacy that they'd like to put on the agenda, now's the time. All right, so the first candidate is Ivan from NVIDIA for the Helm charts. Is there anyone that would vote no or has a reason to vote no? Right, excellent. And for project candidates, we've got the accelerated bridge CNI being proposed. Yuri, would you care to give a brief overview of the accelerated bridge CNI?
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name is Yuri. I'm from NVIDIA. So we would like to propose accelerated bridge CNI to network plumbing working group. Accelerated bridge CNI is a fork of SRIOV CNI, which main difference is that it is rely on bridge API, and also it reuse some parts of SRIOV. So to use this CNI, you need supported hardware. Right now, there are a couple of requirements for this. So this hardware should support SRIOV in switch def mode, and also hardware drivers should support Linux bridge offloading. As far as I know, no vendors support this at the moment. If we talk about NVIDIA, we plan to support this in our driver in kernel 5.14. Our implementation doesn't use any proprietary APIs or any custom APIs, so all of them are common. So we would like to move this project to network plumbing working group and continue developing together with community. So we have document with short description of accelerated bridge CNI, and also you can check repo on GitHub. It has some API description and other stuff. So I think if you be very briefly, that's all.
Yuri, thank you for the details. I personally am somewhat familiar with the effort, but I would encourage anyone to click into these links and take a look. And we can hold a vote, or if anyone thinks that they'd like more time to review this before voting, is there anyone that would vote against this project candidate, or anyone that needs more time? All right, it sounds like we will vote to both accept accelerated bridge CNI and also accept Ivan as a maintainer for the Helm chart. So thank you very much on all fronts. Hey, Yuri, is this a situation where you'll transfer the repository, or should we create a new repo for it?
In general, we have maintainers in NVIDIA in my group, and we will discuss and try to choose best solution. I think we can just transfer this repository to network plumbing working group. So I'm not seeing any issue with this. So.
Okay. I just threw my email in chat. If you decide that you can't transfer it and you need a repository created, you can get in touch with me and I'll handle that.
Okay, sure, thank you.
Do we need to vote on a maintainer now or for that new project? Or once it's transferred?
Yeah, actually, that probably is a good idea, and let's also, yeah. Of course, in the upcoming weeks, if people decide that they'd like to become maintainers, that's also possible. But
yeah, but don't you need at least one when you do the transfer so that you can have set up the right permissions, or at least someone can access it?
It's going to be that you're not going to have a whole lot of fun with that repository without being a maintainer, for sure. Yuri, would you like to be a maintainer of this?
Yeah.
You don't sound excited about that.
No. Okay. Let's write my name here. I will be maintainer candidate for accelerated breach DNA.
Excellent. Anyone else that would like to be a candidate?
Like you said, we can add more later. I think it's just important to have at least one when you're initially.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Billy. Thanks. That's an oversight for sure. So to bring it to a vote, is there anyone who would vote against Yuri being a maintainer for the accelerated bridge standard? All right, excellent. Yuri, you are a maintainer of Bridge CNI according to the vote. Awesome. We will need to update the community docs for this. All right, that concludes the regular business. All right, next up, this one I think is pretty minor, but I noticed that across the entire Network Plumbing Working Group GitHub namespace, that there's LGTM.com integration. And I was hoping that we could disable that going across all of the repositories. It's totally fine if people want to use it per repository, but it like runs too broad of a test. And so, for example, Multis will fail on it doesn't pass the JavaScript check, which I'm not disappointed by that, but I'd like to turn it off and make it per repo. And I basically wanted to let people know about this before I go and disable something that people were relying on for other projects.
I'm not familiar. Can you give like 2 sentences on what it's doing?
And so as far as I know, LGTM.com runs some kind of linting on your code and does some type of conformance test. And that's about it. So it'll give you some, output on a pull request saying like you passed or didn't pass for this lint/conformance test of some variety.
And so does GitHub just have that enabled by default, and so we just need to disable it, or did someone go in and add it and we didn't realize? Or
so it is, I'm not sure if it was a default when we created the org or what, but I didn't notice it until Multis had gotten moved, and then it was fine until it started failing the JavaScript test. But that's about the context I have. Is anyone using it specifically on any repos right now that is relying on it?
Is it hurting anyone? Even if it's there?
I mean,
I'm not familiar with it. I'm just asking if it's just doing linting and verifying things for us, then why bother?
I mean, it's not a bad thing. However, it does cause, for example, for Multis, it's just annoying that you go to see that the CI is passed, and then it says the CI has failed one job, and you look, and then you go, oh, it's a test that I can ignore. So you can ignore it, but we lose our at a glance if this pull request passed CI or not, because every pull request is now failing one job in CI. So I would say it's more of a stubbed toe than a broken arm, but yeah, it's one of those. All right. If no one is using it otherwise, I'm going to set it up to per repo, and we can re-enable it on the repos that may rely on it if we're missing somebody today. I've got the next topic too, and hopefully not too long on this, but I wanted to bring up VERFs on secondary networks, and I searched the notes, but I only found one mention of it, that Per had mentioned it at the end of last year, and I wanted to see if anyone remembered other discussions or we came to any other conclusions on this one.
So at that time, I mean, at the last year, at that time, we just start to have the birth plugin in the CNI as a reference CNI plugin, and then so of course as I believe that we NetAttach Dev, our working group is focusing on the CNI plugins and then the relative stuff. So the last year timing, we just have the birth plugin. So that's why we do not have the not so much discussion. That's what I know.
Okay, cool. No, it makes sense that that's still pretty new, so it's not too surprising.
Was there any discussion in the alt meeting? I don't think I've been a regular attending to that.
Yeah, no worries. Tomo and I attend it. Per also attends Suresh too, but I don't recall. I will also check those notes too.
Well, when you said you checked the notes, it's just that might be
but
a source to check.
In the additional discussion meeting, we do not discuss the above plugin.
Okay.
In the detail. Maybe sometimes we are just a chat about this stuff, but not so much.
All right, cool. And just for some context here, this just happened to come up in a conversation between Michael Cambria and myself, and I went to go see if we had any notes, and I didn't. So I was looking for a reminder, but trying to remember what the rest of the context is for that, but that's what I remember at the moment. Well, cool. We don't have to dwell on this one unless anyone has any other thoughts. Otherwise, I can pass it off to Adrian C. Do we have Adrian on the call?
No, he's on
No.
PTO today.
Oh, okay. At any rate, his question is, which group name prefix should we use? So the like DNS like namespace, and he says, so for the multi-network policy, the net attached def CRD uses cates.cni.cncf.io, and he proposes some alternatives.
Wouldn't that make? I have similar topic. The next topic is quite similar, but over there we already have some confusion around that. Won't that create a more additional kind of churn? We have so many people already using the net attachment definition CRD that changing that one, that's going to be a big deal, won't it?
Yeah, I think that's going to be non-trivial for sure. And if I recall correctly, and I can try to look this up in the notes too, but I think the gist was that there was already out in the wild cni.cncf.io, and we were figuring that this is Kubernetes specific implementation of CNI as it relates to the CNCF, I guess, as CNI is part of that. It doesn't mean that we couldn't change this in the future, but yeah, I think it's going to be non-trivial for sure. I moved your topic for the SROV operator into this topic. Is there more commentary that you've got, or go ahead?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So sorry, let me add some comments for that. So I understood from the so the once we launching the some new project at that time, I suppose that we could use the new org name. But also some stuff is like the let's imagine that the Multinetwork annotation or the Multinetwork policy, the org name. So this is already released in the some certain time. So it's pretty hard to replacing. I mean that we need to thinking about how to migrate the old version stuff, new version. So maybe we could decide which org name, but at that time that it should be, how do I say, not strict change request to the current running project. That is I hope.
I guess another thing too is so in the proposed alternatives, they know npwg.io. We also could officially become a CNCF working group. I don't think that it's a heavy lift. It's just paperwork that I have not followed up on. But if people are feel strongly about it, we certainly can boil that back up. And I have a contact at Red Hat who is part of the CNCF governance org and understands how that process works. So I can bring that back up too if that was a concern. I mean, I think at the time when we came up with it, I don't think that we were considering putting network plumbing working group in the thing, in that the scope was fairly narrow at that point when we were focused purely on the net attached def itself and kind of expanded in scope. Sorry, I think that you might have gotten cut off about the SROV operator. Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. But just a bit of a context, there was a comment, and this is a link on doubting whether that project could use that group. And basically, I would like to have a consensus from this meeting on like an approval for that we can. That's one part, and the other part looks like we would have to define whether the prefix that we just discussed, whether we should consider, is the consideration that we had just what you just mentioned, we want to push forward, and then push, if we were to move to the new group name, then it should be that NPWG something group, or just stick to what we have right now. Because the initial, so someone created a PR that was exactly used the group that was used in Multus. And the network attachment definition CRD. So that's the proposal. I'm not stuck to any name, by the way. It's just a matter of me to kind of on the SROV operator to move from the kind of vendor specific one. And there's this discussion, how can that be done in that PR? And this is not the topic here. I just want to get a confirmation that it's okay for everyone that uses maybe that everyone that's inside the plumbing group in GitHub should be able to use that group, whatever we decide on, of course. And right now, I think the default is this CNCF IO, right?
Yeah, correct. So yes, cni.cnf.io, Kate's dot. Let's see, prefix of Kate's dot. I'm just taking a look at the pull request again. Of course, my GitHub tab is crashing. Hang with me here. Okay, yep, I see it. Yeah, so that change does use the currently used group name. So just make an extra note. Yeah, I mean, this is a fair change, of course, because this is part of our charter of this group is to remain vendor neutral, and also the namespace that you're using is the one that we have historically used. So there's that. Is this? We can put it to a vote. So certainly one of the items in the governance is that if for a given project you can't come to a consensus between the maintainers, you can bring it to the group for a vote. So I guess to me there's kind of two parts to that. One of which is the namespace that's used and the name that's used itself. I think that that's something that, people should decide on. But secondarily, I think that there may also be a technical consideration with the migration from one name to the
no, and that's perfectly fine. That's something that that's something that the PR discusses around. So and that's I think this is the secondary part. Well, how and technical, how can it be done? And I just want to confirm here that we have the mandate to use that group. This is my kind of concern, and that's how I'm bringing to this meeting here, so that we can say that everyone that's inside this network plumbing group in GitHub can use this group, and basically that's it, right? Later, I think there will be the voting that you're referring to. I think if it gets to it, I think that should be done in the Monday meeting where we have the discussion about the SRV operator. Unless that we won't get any consensus, then we can bring it back here to this meeting. But yeah.
Mache, no, this is awesome. Thanks for the clarification on the scope here. And thank you for bringing this to the group. And also, please definitely bring it back to the group if you can't come to a consensus on the other considerations. So I think let's open the floor if anyone has any comments about using a different namespace. My introductory comment would be, I think that it's going to be difficult to change the one for net attached def. I think that we're going to see that around for a while. So my general recommendation would be to stick with it, but I'd like to hear if people have another opinion, because naming things is difficult.
Yeah.
So I guess my opinion would be, unless anyone feels super strong about it, would be leave it as it is. And I do think, and the second point is any repo underneath the network plumbing working group should be allowed to use whatever we decide on, whether it's what's existing or if we change the name.
So to me, yeah, I suppose that so now we should keep the namespace we are already using. So this is it's pretty hard to change it suddenly. But on the other side, once we launch the new project or new repository in our working group, at that time we should use the newer name. And then maybe in the future, like if we publishing the net-attached def spec in the new version, and that the major version change. At that time, we could think about to changing the stuff for existing. I mean that if the big major changes happen, then the current project can changing the name to the new default. But otherwise, we kept for a while.
I agree about that name change is a major change for the project anyway.
The thing is, if you change a group, I think versioning doesn't have anything to do with it, because you completely change the namespace, right? So the core is completely different space. So it's like you starting from scratch. Isn't that the case, or I'm missing something in there?
Technically, you're right, but it depends on how we do migrations. But it's then other conversation, I think.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So that's something that probably we can be the SRV operator can be treated as an example. How can it be done? All right. So in terms of usage and the mandate of using that, I don't think there is no opposition on that one, right? That's one.
Yeah, I think that's correct. It sounds like of the three voices that it was +1s for using the current name, and also with Billy's mention that you can use an arbitrary subname, subdomain, and yeah. So yeah, no dissent from using it as is. Is Mache, is that acceptable to bring back to the maintainers, or do we want an official vote?
Yeah, that's sufficient. Thanks. So now, yeah, I know what to do. Yeah, that's
right.
perfectly fine.
Cool. All right. Excellent. Any other commentary before we move on to this presentation from Alok?
No, my only comment was, since Adrian sees the one that brought it up, do we need to briefly bring it up next meeting as well?
Yes, let's carry it over to the next meeting. Good call. All right, I'll stub that in. Alok, you've got the floor. Let me make sure that there's permissions to allow you to share your screen. All right, I just changed the permission, so you should be able to share and present when you're ready.
Okay, yeah. Can I share then? Yeah. So, hello everyone. Myself, Alok from Ericsson. Yeah. So, I'm just here to bring up the concept and to make the community aware about the proposal and the work we are doing in the Kubernetes external networking orchestration domain. We started up last year with a study internally within Ericsson about how we could do the orchestration and automation of primarily the secondary external networks, the multis secondary networks, basically, to begin with. And we come up with a proposal and a concept called external network operator. It's a Kubernetes operator, which can manage and automate such secondary networks dynamically whenever the CNF instantiation occurs and requires some additional networks to be configured before it becomes fully functional. And that was a bit of a history. And then from Red Hat, I think Tal Liran started a discussion in CNCF, and there we have a channel for telecom user group, and that kind of match up the concepts of what we are trying to achieve and trying to fill it in. And we started up our discussions there as well. And later on, we decided to have that discussion in CNF working group. That's another working group under the CNCF umbrella. And then also we had some discussions with the Red Hat folks, and Doug was also there last week about the modeling and the API, how it should look like, and what are the different constructs that are being involved from both northbound as well as southbound, that we can park it maybe for some other time as a follow-up thing. And so this is about the background and a bit of context. Let me put it in a slide mode. So yeah, like as we all know that the standard Kubernetes service model is not so sufficient to make the CNFs, the cloud data network functions, to be fully functional. Like we all know, it's a single NAT interfaces and the stateful load balancer when it comes to the external networking, which doesn't fulfill. And also there are certain performance requirements that the telco VNFs require, right? So the interface is based on the kernel IP stack, which doesn't fulfill those requirements, and also the proper network separation that doesn't exist within the default net service model. So the multis is the way to overcome, to fill that limitation in the telco applications, and that allows the multiple external networks that can be attached and can be consumed through the network attachment definitions that can be given in the pod manifest. So that we all aware about, right? But the problem is, or the gap which we have identified and trying to fill it in, is we still have the pre-configured fabric underneath. The underlay networks are being all configured primarily in a static manner on a day zero kind of a thing when you deploy your your Kubernetes clusters, and basically you then have to maintain it manually during the life cycle. And so it's sort of a, can say, the appliance kind of a model that we should be aware what all applications that will be deployed and what will be the network requirements, and we have to plan considering the future about the expansion and the scalability aspects of about what all VPNs that they will be requiring in future, and plan accordingly when it comes to configuring those underlay networks on a fabric level. So yeah, so this is the area which we are trying to automate primarily through the external network operator. So if we take an example of a workflow for a secondary networks without any automation, so how it has been done today, that there is some cloud admin that has first have to configure the VLANs and basically the fabric, that the underlay networks, and then once that has been done, that can create the network attachment definitions that will be used by the network functions. And in the meantime, the gateway orchestration has to be done, where the VRFs will be bind with the created VLANs in the step one. And once all this has been done, so the admin can then instantiate the network function, which can then consume the created tenant networks, right? So that has, like I said, all been done manually, or at least the underlay networking part, it still be done mostly manually or through some bash scripts or with some terminal commands directly. So what are the problem statement and the solution that we are trying to bring it up? So think of it like if we have to configure such external networks thousands of times, so it might not be an optimal solution, plus could be an error prone and a tedious task to do. So what we say as a solution is the automation of those tasks through the external network operator that will automate those external network creation and basically the management of such, the life cycle of those external networks can be managed through that operator. So what is, like I said, it's a Kubernetes operator that will be running inside the Kubernetes cluster for automating those external networks. It's a controller component that will be deployed during the cluster deployment time and will follow the life cycle of the cluster. It has a pluggable architecture which kind of supports the multi-vendor fabric agnosticity that allows different vendor fabrics to be plugged in through the corresponding plugins for configuring their fabrics for the underlay networks. And also it follows the two facade architecture, one internally managing the cluster custom resources like the NAT creations based on the API, the constructs that the northbound API expects, as well as the external one that will be managing the underneath networks and the fabric through the corresponding plugin. So let's revisit the same workflow with the introduction of with the sense of automation. So it's the end-to-end flow. So we start with some orchestration layer, like it could be an NFVO Mano layer, which could onboard the CSAR packages. Those are the Tosca-based templates that will be onboarded when we have to instantiate a network service. So that could then translate some artifacts like the external resource definition, which is nothing but a YAML or JSON based objects that we have modeled already through the northbound API. And I have put it a link in the meeting notes for some who's been interested, and we can maybe take some follow-up sessions to go in details about each and every constructs. But then in step 2, those can feed into northbound API. And then based on those objects, the will then triggers the fabric orchestration, which is configuring the VLANs in the data fabric using the corresponding fabric plugin through the southbound API. And once that is being done, can then create the net attachment definitions, and then followed by NFVO or some other orchestration software can kicks in the gateway orchestration, which is the binding of the created VLANs with the VRF inside the gateway. And once all this step to configure the tenant networks has been done, the orchestration layer can then delegate the task to the VNFM, the network function manager, to instantiate the network functions, which can then use the created network attachment definitions, which we have created through So that's the overall flow for one very fundamental, simplistic use case of creation of the L2 networks through So any questions, comments so far from anyone about before we jump into the architecture? Okay, so this is the modular architecture. So if I start from top to bottom, so it has a northbound API, which is nothing but some CRDs that are being fed into through the NBI. We have, as I said, modeled it how and what all constructs it has to expect from for orchestration of those networks. So, and that I put it as a link in the meeting notes, if anyone would like to see. And then that there is a component called fabric agnostic operator, which basically has an interface towards the southbound API of and that calls the corresponding fabric plugin based on the fabric that are being used in the customer deployment. So like I mentioned, it supports a fabric agnosticity. So if a customer or an operator has fabric A, which is being used for as a data fabric for their solution, so there will be a corresponding fabric plugin for that fabric to configure the underneath networks. That could basically has an interface either directly to the fabric or some fabric manager or controller, like an SDN controller. So to configure that fabric. And we currently running a POC for where we are testing it out with OVS bridge, and we have developed dummy OVS plugin, if I call it like, and I put it a link for the GitHub repo as well for that. It's still the work in progress, the plugin itself, but yeah, it's in, yeah, I put it the link in the meeting notes for if somebody wants to take a look. So that's the overall architecture for and yeah, so any questions or feedback, any objections to do this way?
Hey, yeah. In your previous picture, you had a pluginable CNI. Does it mean it replaces Multus, or what does that mean?
No, it's like basically Multus supports, it's a meta CNI, right? So it supports various like OVS CNI internally, or you could have like Mac VLAN. So that's basically this blue boxes. So you could have different CNIs internally for the pod, right? So
will this operator install new CNIs or not?
Sorry?
Will Enno install CNI plugins?
I mean, if Multis supports that CNI, so I think that can be doable and would be supported by Eno as well. Yeah.
So look, this is Per. I lost my picture. I only hear your voice. But so you have one part, right, that talks to the infrastructure. That's what you call the fabric. Any vendor's networking solution that you then basically have had some way to coordinate server to switch port on the fabric. And then when a pod gets scheduled, CNI gets called, and it's time to attach networks to the pod, you can go to the fabric and pull up those networks and then attach them to the pod in the expected way. That's what you've done, right?
Yeah, in a nutshell, yes, more or less that way.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. That's the way it should be done.
Any other comment, reflection? So as I mentioned, we have a Git repository in a dedicated, we call it Nordics repo. So we are expecting some, like with our strategy to make it open source, we expecting some support, and like if this proposal could be the way to orchestrate the multi-secondary networks. So yeah, with the intentions to make it a sort of a de facto API, so to configure such external networks. So basically for managing and automating those external networks that are being required by the network functions during the lifetime, and it's to disintegrate with the cluster lifecycle, like as I mentioned in the beginning.
Will you share these slides? Like I said, I couldn't.
Yeah, it's already there in the meeting notes. I put at the link.
Oh,
yeah.
So I have a question. Is the intent of this to help with bare metal clusters?
Right. So that's a good question. And yeah, like you see, I hope I'm sharing the screen. It may be just Per who is not able to see the screen. Am I sharing currently?
Yeah, I can see it.
Yep.
Yeah,
okay. So as you can see, there are various different plugins. So Neutron plugin could be for the clusters being deployed on, let's say, the OpenStack, and then that will be used as an API for your fabric configuration. And then you have the ML2 drivers, basically, that has an interface with your real fabric. But in case of bare metal, like if I take the example of this fabric A, you have the interface from the southbound interface from Eno to using the fabric plugin, which then has a direct interface with the fabric to configure those networks as the underlay. So yeah.
So basically, it's a Kubernetes primitive where I could say I could define the VLAN, I can define the subnet, and then that's going to go and configure it on fabric A, B, whatever it is, right?
Right.
And then it's also going to create network attached definitions and everything like that. But what about like IPAN? Like, do you need to know, like as an operator, right? Do I need to know like, oh, okay, this is the VLAN, this is the IP space that I want to use ahead of time?
Yeah, so that all those attributes, we are expecting it to be aware or fill it in by the network architect when they basically, so we are expecting it from the northbound APIs. The objects, like it might not be readable, but let's say the L2 service, they have an object like the routes and the subnet, and that those objects expects some attributes to be fed in by the network architects. So that should be well aware before to configure the IPAMs. Right?
But you do L2 stitching, right? And then you assume that the IPAM is there, what's there sort of from the spec from, well, I can never remember if it was the plumbing group specification. That's what it looked like to me. And then you can shoot in routes into, are the routes per interface then, or that you had in your, on GitLab?
Mm.
How do they map to what's there when you set up routes?
So
it's for the pod that you're in, that you're bringing up, right? I didn't see any VRFs or anything like that.
No, so the VRFs are like those are on the gateway level. So the VRFs will be then stitched with the created VLANs in the fabric through, let's say, the orchestration layer or
yes.
some.
You're saying the gateway runs in the fabric or in the Kubernetes?
It could be an external gateway as well. Right.
Yeah.
I just want to say, hey, thanks for this. Thanks for this presentation. I thought this was pretty interesting. We run about 75 bare metal clusters, so we're interested in this, I think. So thank you.
Thank you for listening in, and yeah, I mean, I can get in touch with Doug about the follow-ups regarding maybe we can plan something around understanding the data model, like I said, about what all constructs, and maybe that could even make it more understandable from the IPAM and the routable things. I can go in details around that concept, and we can give a quick demo maybe. But yeah, I can check with you, Doug, offline. Yeah.
Cool, sounds good. Yeah, thank you for taking the time to present it and to educate people about this. Just as a quick recap, the regular discussion about this, does this happen in the CNF working group or?
Yeah, so we have a discussion channel in, I mean, we have created one discussion.
I posted the discussion to the
Hey, Gerg, okay. Yeah, you were, yeah, so thanks for sharing the link there. You posted in the chat, you said, right?
Great. All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And yeah, thank you everybody for the time today. And excellent. Yeah. So let's see everybody in 2 weeks. That will be on the 17th. So, oh, and thanks, Sergey. Awesome. I will put that in the agenda too. All right. Well, everybody have a nice day and catch you all on the 17th. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.